Hello there. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today we are kicking off our post-event conversations that we had with Agility, Resilience, and Anti-Fragility 2022 event that we had previous month. And our guest is Goz Alhir, who briefly talked about disruptive commercialization in the event, and we're gonna continue the conversation. So let's welcome Goz.
Hi there.
Hi Goz, how are you today?
I am doing excellent. Thank you. I hope you're well.
I'm good. Thanks for asking. So, real quick, Gaz, quick introduction about you. Who is Gaz in here?
Absolutely. It's a loaded question, but we'll keep it simple. And thank you for inviting me. I think it'll be a good, robust discussion post the last event to continue the discussion on this topic. But who Goz is essentially my background, which may not answer the who is question, but I have almost 30 years of experience in the healthcare business marketplace. It's been
Hmm.
across the kind of entire ecosystem of the healthcare marketplace, from small companies to large companies, but really focused on commercialization and the different functions within commercialization. So if you think about business strategy, think about sales and marketing, business development, operations, that kind of encompasses my years of experience across different organizations, different disease states, and then also both on the therapeutic side and the diagnostics, life science side of the marketplace. That's kind of me in a nutshell. More personal, probably just a student of life, right? I think that we have to continue to learn, share learnings, and then learn from each other. And I continue to kind of put that in the forefront as I conduct business.
Great, great. Very well said, Gaz. Thank you. Thanks for giving the professional as well as personal touch for that question. And ever so quickly, quick introduction from my perspective. I am coach, consultant. I've closely worked with leadership and organizations to transform as well as work across the teams, across the levels to help them to operate at their optimal levels to deliver the business outcomes. And with that said, again, some of the questions that I'm gonna ask you or pose you, maybe a quick recap on the conversation that we have in the event. So after a few minutes, maybe let's say 5 minutes, then we will get into deeper questions about commercialization and disruptive commercialization. So, guys, firstly, why do we need disruptive commercialization?
Absolutely. And that's the $1 million question. And we discussed this last time, but companies, organizations, kind of just the world, even whether it's academic institution, some of the largest and most renowned across the country, spend a lot of time, energy, money, people power, people hours to develop, right? To develop and create something that's very innovative, something that actually is disruptive, no matter what marketplace you're in, whether you're in healthcare, whether you're in retail. There's a lot of money and resources spent to develop
Mhm,
something that's new, right? New to the
mhm,
market, or better than what a market's already created, to enter the market to provide something that's enhanced, if you will, right? And for a number of great reasons. And a lot of times we spend a lot of that up front in the innovation side of development and creation. But then when it comes to commercializing it and taking a step back, commercialization at the end of the day means we want to get it to an adoption phase that it's benefiting the most people, or the largest amount of people that's possible, right? And
mhm,
if we don't take a disruptive approach to kind of commercializing it, or the end product of adoption of this great new innovation, then you don't fulfill the true kind of success that's needed to help the product help others, if you will, right? And so that's really the key to this: is we take a very unique, innovative, disruptive approach to develop innovative products or services, but then on the back end we consistently we've used previously over the years, and not take a more disruptive to get the full fulfillment of our product or service.
Thank you, guys. So you brought in quite a few topics or pointers in that point. So you mentioned commercialization around of product or service, innovation and innovative products, and disruptive productization. Not only productization, disruptive commercialization as well. So that leads to a question then: can there be something that can be commercialized if it is not product or a service or just in an idea phase? Let's say if it is in a prototype or something, can that be commercialized?
It absolutely can, right? Because it's an approach that you're taking, right? So anything that you have, if you say, what is my end goal, right? If I want to get it to a user, if I want to better enhance something, how do I continue? It's not a one time and point that you're kind of focused, but it's a sustainable growth, if you will, right? So if you
Mhm.
say, where is it today, and how do we continue to enhance that? How do we continue to grow? How do we continue to kind of develop so it benefits either in a different way or benefits more masses? Then you absolutely should take the approach of saying commercialization isn't just a one-time point, but how do I continue that continuum and get the inflection point, or at any
Mhm.
given point get an additional inflection point through taking a disruptive approach?
Wonderful. Good, good. So talking about the continuous disruption and continuous commercialization culture, how do we build or cultivate that kind of mindset or culture?
Yes, no, it's a great question, and logic tells you it should be easy, right? I think if you talk to most people in any industry, they say we want to do things differently, right? We want to be innovators. We want to take a different approach. We don't want to kind of just take the same old. It's boring if we take the same old blueprint that's used in the past and then just implement it. But we would like to try something new, right? But saying that and actually implementing it is a world of difference, right? And it
Mhm.
starts with a mindset. And we talked about last time, it starts with you've got to have a deliberate approach to say, I need to model from all levels of an organization what that looks like. The openness, the
Mhm.
transparency, the honesty. And we know, kind of in the spirit of transparency, there are going to be mistakes along the way because it's not a blueprint. We're trying new things, and that has to be communicated from the top down within an organization. The CEO to every leader within the organization, within their functions, and to at the individual level as you're collaborating across functions. That needs to be a mindset and an acceptance to say, we understand we're taking a new approach. There's reasons why we're taking a new approach. There's reasons
Mhm.
why we want to be disrupted, right?
Right.
What
Right.
comes with that is being open and having the ability to say, we're going to make some mistakes. Those mistakes are learnings. How do we
Mhm.
learn from those things and then actually continue our path in making sure that we're, getting the inflection point that we want and not staying the course to just the standard?
Right. Right. This is great. And you talked about openness. You talked about top-down approach, and helping people and have everyone on board. So with this perspective, in disruptive commercialization, how does the risk savvy mindset comes into picture? That's number one. And what is how do you define avoid bigger risks, and at the same time let's take risk consistently that is helping us?
That's right. Well, and again, risk savviness means that it needs to be a calculated risk, right? So anybody can kind of come up with an idea and not take any other factors into kind of their thought process and say, let's try something new. That could be
Mhm.
done. But when we say risk savvy, it's a calculated risk, right? So yes, it may be something new, but you're actually saying, here's the upside, here's the downside, and because of that, it makes sense to try this new thing. Okay.
Mhm.
So giving verbal, right? We can stand at a podium, whether it's the CEO or leaders, and say, we would like a culture of this risk savviness. We want to reward right, is one thing. People will
Mm-hmm.
take that for what it is and saying, okay, is that really true? Do we mean it? And I'll give you an example that we've used with organizations, whether it was myself as a leader or I've helped organizations kind of take this approach. So you first communicate it. It has to be communicated. It's clear. The expectations are clear, right? Everybody's on board. But you
Right.
have to also take the next step of rewarding it, right? So in the same way, if you think about a sales organization as part of the function of an organization, we routinely, whether on a quarterly basis, on a yearly basis, talk about who's exceeding sales, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're
Mm-hmm.
rewarding, whether it's monetarily or through recognition, people that are achieving those things. In the same
Mm-hmm.
respect, at those same times, you have to publicly reward, right? Not just verbally and recognize, but also rewards where we've had organizations implement, whether they're giving, trips, whether they're giving equity, whatever it is that reward is that they're actually rewarding people for performance. We have to use the same approach when we're rewarding risk savviness and learnings, mistakes, and so forth. To say we're
Mm-hmm.
now highlighting people almost the same way you would do in a list of performance and sales achievements. You would highlight people that tried something new, some that were successful, some may have not been successful, but the success was the learning, and we're rewarding them and recognizing them in the same way. You have to model that so it's not just, kind of verbal and people are saying, yes, that's great, but what is really in it at the end of the day that's tangible, and is it going to hurt me, versus they actually now have a tangible thing to say, we're rewarding this behavior the same way we're rewarding the success and behavior of exceeding performance, however you define it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. You brought in two dimensions of where where people are trying something unique and risk taking in order to disrupt the commercialization and reward them, and also another dimension is helping or rewarding people who exceedingly achieve their targets, sales, marketing, whatever it is. And I am thinking, when I process this information, I'm thinking, what does that means for the people who don't want to be disrupt the commercialization, who wants to just go with the flow, do bare minimum, and hit the number what it is set quarter over quarter or year over year, and how to
Yeah,
cope up with such people in the current times.
sure. No, and that's a challenge that's faced on a minute basis, on a daily basis in business and in other fractions of the marketplace. And this to me becomes a much bigger question, right? It becomes a question of what is the culture that we've developed within an organization? And again, that's from leadership, but to the individual contributors across the board. And
Mhm.
it actually even starts with your hiring profile, right? So when you're looking at individuals
Perfect.
that you're bringing to the organization, what am I looking for? And a lot of times
Mhm.
we look for the tangible. Do they have a certain education? Do they have certain experiences, right? That's in our marketplace. Are they subject matters in a specific topic? We look for those things because those are easy to identify. What we don't
Mhm.
tend to look for, right, in the profile when we hire is, are these people problem solvers? Or are they
Mhm.
just implementers, right? I surround myself with people that it's not, we are driven and motivated by every day potentially is a new challenge. And that
Mhm.
actually excites you. It's not that you just want to go do the mundane and say, I'm going to do the same thing over and over again on a daily basis. But I'm here to take an approach where I want to solve a problem, right?
Right.
And if I'm faced with a problem that excites me, right? So to
Mhm.
me, it starts early on. Now it's difficult if the organization's already built and you say, well, how do we engage the people that maybe aren't wired that way, right?
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
there's unique ways to do that. I'll give you another example if you don't mind.
Sure, sure,
Routinely,
please go ahead.
when a team or an individual succeeds, we will actually have them present to senior leadership or present to a different department, right? And
Mhm.
the thought process is so we can learn from each other, right? But we usually do it only when we predefine what the success was, right? So
Right.
if we say, look, somebody Here's what we identified as success or determined as success. They achieved it, and now we're have them present because we want others to learn. Rarely, if
Mm-hmm.
ever, do we take that approach when somebody actually took a risk, right? And learned from that risk. And again, the outcome necessarily wasn't a success from what our standard definition is, but it actually was a success because they now have tried something, failed or succeeded. The thought process now is that they actually like to try different things, take risks. We have that person or that team engaged in a very
Mm-hmm.
similar presentation to either other functions, other leaders, or executive leadership. That rewards them and it actually reinforces the behavior that you want. And it's not just
Mm-hmm.
the people that, by the standard definition, met or exceeded a performance goal that we highlight as the best practice.
Yes, yes. While you are giving this insightful wisdom, and I'm processing that, and what comes to my mind is, if we have this kind of individuals and people who are working together to disrupt the commercialization, then the obvious question, maybe this is obvious or not, is there anything that cannot be commercialized, or anything can be commercialized? What's your take on that?
Well, I wouldn't say, and again, going from kind of 100%, if you will, on any topic is always, in my opinion, kind of troubling, right? So, are there
Mm-hmm.
things that shouldn't be commercialized, or maybe aren't? You could commercialize it, but it wouldn't be successful to the degree that you want. Absolutely, right? I think that's where the innovation starts.
Okay.
If it's another me too, if you will, even if it's a service, right? It doesn't have to be a tangible product. It's another me too in a flooded market.
Mm-hmm.
Then the reality is somebody along the way, whether it's individuals, leadership, consultants, organizations, should say, is there a place that we can better kind of invest our efforts?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that when you're asking that question and saying, is it going to make a change? Is it going to have an impact? Is somebody, something, an industry, people, community going to be better for it? And
Mm-hmm.
resoundingly, if that answer is no, it's just another Me Too, in my
Right,
opinion,
right.
you can
Mm-hmm.
commercialize it. But the reality
Right.
is, you probably shouldn't.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Thanks for calling out that differentiation there. And speaking of degrees, tangibles, and intangibles, could a company commercialize too quick, too much, or too slow, too little? So, how do we find what works and what doesn't?
Yes, no, it's a great question. The short answer is yes to both of those, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
think, honestly, what sometimes happens is it becomes a time or a duration of life cycle that becomes
Mm-hmm.
more of the question. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, because we get so enamored, it could be a great innovation, but we get so enamored in that we have to be extremely successful, profitable in a very short period of time,
Right.
right? And we
Mm-hmm.
miss kind of the real goal is to say, if you've got a disruptive product, if you've got a disruptive service, the real success is not kind of in the short period of time, how successful can I be, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to be profitable because that feeds the pipeline for the rest of the organization, the rest of the commercialization of
True.
the product, right, or service.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more focused on long term sustainability of success, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just how do I become profitable. So
Right.
sometimes organizations, sorry, have too much of a short term, if you will, approach versus the long term success of their commercialization. So it's more focused on how do I become successful and profit tomorrow versus how do I, that needs to play a part of it. Otherwise, you won't fulfill the entire kind of life cycle and continue to enhance. But it's more so of how do I take the first steps to actually do that for a long term sustainable growth of success.
Mm-hmm. 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 Thank you.
So,
Thank you,
so if
guys.
if they take that short term, a lot of times we're cautioning them as I work with organizations or within my own organization to say, so have we fully thought through, is that just short term success, or is this kind of long term sustained success that will feed all the other disruptive innovations that we would like to bring to market?
Certainly, certainly, yeah. And then you answered one way or the other way for my next question coming up. The innovation versus disruption, short term versus long term. Is it long term sustainable success? So I was going into profitability versus growth. So and what is your direct message to CXOs and in terms of how to balance short and long term success?
Yes, that's and I mean it's not one doesn't exist without the other. So of course you have to be profitable to fulfill kind of and feed, if you will, everything that's needed for long-term sustainability. But that can't that's
Mhm,
a step in kind of the path or the journey versus the journey itself. I think
mhm,
again, if organizations are thinking through profitability and that being the journey, there's the first
mhm,
yellow flag that goes up, right? To say we've got
mhm.
to step back from that because the
Yes.
balance is yes, I have to be profitable. And how do I do that in the most efficient or the shortest timeline? I want to shrink that timeline. And you have to
Mhm,
have very open and transparent conversations to say, are we being realistic? There's a lot of factors that go into profitability. There's a lot of factors that go into commercialization, market dynamics. For God's sakes, 3 years ago, did any of us imagine that COVID would hit? And so if
exactly.
you set your plan and your goals pre-COVID and said, here's what success looks like, here's what profitability looks like, here's what commercialization looks like, and COVID comes along, I would venture to say if you didn't stop to say there's factors now that have impacted what that looks like and we have to revisit, you probably aren't going to be successful, right? So
Mhm,
we have to ask those questions and say, yes, profitability is steps along the way that help us to get to true success of growth long term, right? And the
mhm,
balance is you can very quickly, and sometimes we all get kind of caught up because again, we answer to stakeholders, shareholders, if it's a public company to say, are we profitable? How profitable are we? And we miss including, if you will, here's what it looks like today, but this is just a portion of the success that we're driving to in the future.
mhm, mhm. Thank you. Thanks, guys. So based on what you mentioned about profitability, growth, and all that stuff, and we talked about briefly about pre-COVID and post-COVID, what does that mean all about? Now, what does it means for disruptive commercialization in 2023? And I say, or I ask this question especially when experts say we are on the brink of a recession, or we may already in recession, and considering the layoffs happening and every company is try to preserve the cash rather than splash it, or try to be in survival mode. And what's your comments or thoughts there?
Yeah, and so the way I look at this, and again, there's a lot of unknowns and there's a lot of lack of stability right now. If you look at our financial situation, the stock market, kind of just any sector that you look at, even in the
Mhm,
health sector, which people always used to say, well, the health sector is protected in a way, right? Because no matter what happens outside of health, people are still getting sick, right? But
yeah.
there's that's true, but there's still a lot of instability within the health sector as well. So to
Mhm,
me, to answer your question, is there is no better opportunity with what's going on than taking an approach that's disruptive. Because what
mhm,
we're really saying is that with all these unknowns and factors and layoffs and so forth, it should be a sign that we can't continue to operate the same way that we've been operating,
mhm, mhm.
which by definition means we have to take a disruptive approach
Right.
because we're being forced into disruption, right? And we can kind of, it all goes full circle.
Mhm,
Disruptive commercialization, disruptive innovation, right? It will happen. Are you going to lead
mhm.
the disruption or are you going to be the receiver of the disruption?
Exactly.
is really
Exactly.
how people should function, right?
Uh-huh.
And so if you're not leading the disruption, you will become the receiver that will get disturbed,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Well
sometimes
said.
that's competitiveness, other companies, but sometimes the marketplace or the true cycle of nature, as COVID did, will bring
Wow.
it your way. And how do you
Mm-hmm.
respond and continue to take an approach of disruptiveness? So I would say to those people is right now it's more important than ever to think differently, to take different approaches, because we have to change. It's
Exactly.
demanding, the marketplace environment is demanding us to operate in a different way, whether that's
Mm-hmm.
technology, whether that's approach, whether that's how lean we work and think. And
Right.
so that presents an opportunity to say, so how am I going to adopt that in 2023 and moving forward? Because I can't function the same way I have been that made me successful up to this point.
Correct. Correct. And thank you for elaborating on how to see the intangibles or the parameters where we don't have control, such as COVID or recession or whatnot. And if I may categorize these as intangibles, the competitive business, the competitors out there for a given organization, if I may categorize that as tangibles, so, what should be the approach of disruptive commercialization of an organization with respect to competitive business strategy?
So it's embedded, right? Business strategy has to be embedded in my disruptive approach, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the business strategy, if you will, it's a huge part of kind of the commercialization process
Correct.
in itself. And so when you're looking at what role does it play, again, it's how what is it that we what is the different approach or mindset, or how are we going to actually make that it's a tangible thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I go back to it's a lot of people, a lot of organizations kind of talk the talk of we should do this or this is our approach, but
Mm-hmm.
getting to an action and to actually implementation, right, is much more
Mm-hmm.
difficult. And
Mm-hmm.
part of that part of that is because especially under distress or stress, what is our gut reaction? Is we revert back to the comfortable. We revert back to the
Mm-hmm.
known, right? And so part of that is because it goes back to they're all interlinked. It goes back to my risk savviness and reward. Because I
Right.
know the comfortable and the known. Also, I with that, I know how it will actually disadvantage me or hurt me if it does. And so I revert back to that because it's my comfort
Mm-hmm.
zone to say, I know if I operate this way, I won't be hurt in this fashion. Where if I'm trying something new and it's unknown, could it actually
Mm-hmm.
hurt me in a more negative way? And people revert back to what they know. That happens at every level within the organization. So when you kind of the business strategy that
Mm-hmm.
you take, one is an organization's business strategy, right? And then you get into functions of
Mm-hmm.
depending on how many
Mm-hmm.
product lines you have or service lines that you have, and are we taking the approach that models that in every one of those things or in every one of those functions that actually models the behavior for the rest of the organization, and in turn models the behaviors for the marketplace that you're in, right? If you think about any
Right.
some of the
Mm-hmm.
non healthcare things, when you think about disruptive, kind of approaches, it's very well known in
Mm-hmm.
kind of in the car industry or in the auto industry, and it's very well known
Right.
in the television industry. Netflix being
Mm-hmm.
one of them. Right, Netflix
Right.
is a great example of kind of disruptive innovation, disruptive
Correct.
approach, which now has become
Mm-hmm.
the norm. But
Yes.
now, all the competitors that maybe weren't competitors because Netflix came in and did something new, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, all the
Mm-hmm.
competitors are trying to disrupt what Netflix does,
Exactly.
right? Or the
Mm-hmm.
standard that has become. It's very similar in the car industry. I mean, years ago, to take an approach that we would have electrical vehicles or a
Mm-hmm.
vehicle without an engine and it's battery operated was
Mm-hmm.
extremely.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, you still have non-adopters. I give you a story. I was in an Uber the other day, and the Uber happened to be she was driving a Tesla.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I, of course, engaged her in conversation and said, how do you like driving the Tesla? What are there, things that you see that you like better than a standard vehicle versus things that you don't like? And then we started talking about kind of the demographics of who likes that car as she's experienced and so forth. And
Mm-hmm.
she mentioned to me, she said, in her experience, the elderly have a real hard time accepting the Tesla when they've ridden with her, right? She
Right.
said
Right.
they're amazed because they say, "How can this run without an engine? What if it breaks down?" It's because they're comfortable with what they've known for years, right?
Right.
But
Right.
Tesla or other automakers, there's other obviously manufacturers. I don't want to highlight just Tesla that took the electrical vehicle approach and so forth, had to disrupt kind of
Mm-hmm.
the marketplace and what they wanted to do. And sometimes that's going against what the known or the common or the accepted thing. But that is how you engage progress,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
otherwise, you take any pick of your industry, we wouldn't have progress as a community.
Yes, quite insightful. We do have followers or copycats that already disrupted or started a disruption and followers. And in an industry where there are already enough players, for example, 80 coolers who came in and then targeted the niche audience, and they disrupted the cooler business. That is also powerful. So based on the conversation, what we have been discussing here, so I was wondering, what does it looks like a disruptive commercialization in a non-profit organization? Pretty much, this is in line, and then maybe it's just me how I am processing the information. Everything that we have been talking about is for a profit, give something to the community back or CSR, and this works great. How does or how different or how same the disruptive commercialization in non-profit organizations?
It's a great question, and I'll preference my remarks by saying I've never worked for directly, if you will, a nonprofit organization, but I've worked with, right? So different organizations or people within organizations. So it actually should be. So I won't say it always is. It should be easier within a nonprofit organization in some respect than
Mhm.
a profitable organization, right, if you will, or a commercial organization. Because when you
Mhm.
take out the factor, there's a different kind of lens on profitability or the financial aspects of a nonprofit organization. It
Mhm.
starts and it continues to maintain, if you will, the why outside of the financial role, the why of the organization has been put in place and what they're armed to do. So,
Mhm.
and if you keep that in perspective, and again, not that they don't fall off and there's other competing kind of, environments or other competing, if you will, distractions sometimes, but if they come back to the why of the nonprofit or the why of why the organization and what they're trying to deliver, it actually helps them in a much better way than most commercial organizations. Now, the
Mhm.
caveat that they have is from the commercial to the nonprofit, if you will, the nonprofit a lot of times doesn't have the same deep pockets as a commercial organization. So they have to operate with
Mhm.
the lens and of approach of working in more an efficient way because they don't have the funds that they can throw around as many commercial organizations can.
Right. Right.
But they have to see that as a
Right.
positive, right? Again,
Yeah.
it
Thank you.
can't be seen as here's my limitation. They actually have to approach that to say we have to work in an efficient way, and we're not
Mhm.
distracted by other goals than the true goal that we have, which is to deliver on what our organization has, kind of a vision to and goals to do so.
Yes. The organization's vision, purpose, and then longevity and sustainable success. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, yes,
So
yeah.
now coming back to, regardless of non-profit or profit company, is there any point where we can say this is too much of a commercialization where now it's purely minting money, or do we cross that point, or can we reach or realize that point it's all about monetization and it may not be something enhances the product or the experience.
Yeah. So there's a lot of factors in what you just asked, which is great. But so even if a product is in the current market, right, and may be one of the standard products, any organization that's worth its weight in gold is taking an approach to continue to enhance and develop that product, even if it's great today, right?
Hmm.
So you think about, because otherwise, if you remember our definition of I'm either going to disrupt or I'm going to be disrupted, right? So even
Hmm.
if you've got a great product, you have to have the mindset to say, in order for me to continue my path in disruption versus being disrupted, how do I continue to make it better?
Right,
Okay,
right.
so that's one that we quite honestly a lot of times have to say, especially very successful products, as you had mentioned, and that maybe have great adoption. It's a little easier to step away from that versus organizations to continue to stay focused on that. Now, the
Hmm.
other is, kind of your question, and please, if I'm getting it wrong, is there too much commercialization, right? It
Right.
is really kind of what we're asking. The answer to
Yes.
that should be no. Because at the
Hmm.
end of the day, if I've developed an innovative product, okay,
Hmm.
that is going to change the way and fulfill, whether it's healthcare or something else, kind of the true impact that that product needs to have or that service needs to have.
Hmm.
True
Hmm.
commercialization at the end of the day is defined, if you will, to a degree by adoption,
Hmm.
right? And so you take any product, it's unrealistic to have 100% adoption.
Right.
But that's what it would get you to. If I've developed an innovative product, if I've developed an innovative service, in order to fulfill the impact that it would have, I would have to have 100% adoption.
Hmm.
And so to
Hmm.
me, when somebody says, well, is it too much commercialization? Commercialization shouldn't be a bad word. It shouldn't be because I'm trying to make money as kind of the definition. It's if I believe in the value proposition that my
Hmm.
product or service was created to deliver, why would I not want to get that to 100% of the people?
Right, right.
And so that's
Hmm.
keeping in mind to me that there shouldn't be a question of, am I commercializing too much? No, because that is your channel to get that impact, that influence, that product that actually changes people's lives or changes communities to as many
Hmm.
people as you can. And that's what you're doing through the channel of commercialization. I mean, many products, you think about it, many products, and again, I obviously gravitate toward healthcare. It's where I
Hmm.
spent most of, if not all, my career, but are developed in major academic institutions. Brilliant
Hmm.
minds that are elite are coming up with something that's phenomenal. If I
Hmm.
don't commercialize that, very few people ever, if it's developed by these brilliant minds, actually reap the benefit of that product.
Exactly. Hmm.
So it
Yes.
is it I need to commercialize it in order for it to really fulfill its life cycle of impact.
Hmm. Hmm. Right, right. Very, very well said, and that was quite powerful. And it's it's every leader need to have that humanized approach to the commercialization as well, like how you're expressing, and glad to hear that, and I'm sure our audience would have also find that more insightful. And any closing thoughts, Gus? I don't want to ask in terms of takeaways in general. If you want to encapsulate everything, any closing thoughts from your side?
Now, absolutely, and one, I want to thank you and Si for having me on. This is a topic that, to be totally honest with you, Mudasir, is we're only scratching the surface, right?
Right.
I think a lot of people, a lot of organizations say we need to take this approach, right? We need to be disruptive in our commercialization. We need to be disruptive in our approach. They know it needs to happen. Very few people have taken it on and actually started to operate in this way. Okay.
Hmm.
So I appreciate you guys bringing the topic and our continued conversation. So thank you for that. As far as
Mhm.
takeaways, I think there's a few things that I will leave you with, and it almost goes back to what we discussed last time. But if you've got a disruptive service or product
Mhm.
and you are not taking a disruptive commercialization approach, you're doing yourself, your organization, the community, end users a disservice.
Right. Right.
And that has to be deliberate in that approach. Okay.
Mhm.
Secondly, part of successful disruption and commercialization is creating an environment and a culture of risk savviness and people being rewarded. You've got to walk the walk. If you want to
Mhm.
be innovative in your approach in business, then you've got to walk the walk, and people have to think and creatively feel like they can do things and not be
Mhm.
disadvantaged or harmed by it. You have to create that culture if you want to succeed. And
Mhm.
lastly, I'll leave you with this is, and this happens, and I kind of wove it into our conversation. It cannot be a one-time event. We
Mhm.
have to look at if we did all the work and innovators and bright people and so forth to actually deliver and create something that's innovative. We cannot think of it as a one-time event to say, oh, here's in a year we'll be this profitable and it's done. It is a journey, and you
Correct.
have to look at sustainable growth and not measure it. That also, by a one-time event, that also helps the culture to
Mhm.
change and be driven by this is a long-term sustainable approach, and how do I win long-term and impact, have the impact that I want, versus just a year or 2 years, or I'm meeting a $1 billion goal as an organization. You have to get out of the mindset that it's a one and done, but this is a growth and sustainability over time in order for us to have the impact.
Thank you, guys, for putting that all together in the powerful message. So before I share my closing comments, I want to ask this: if people want to learn more about disruptive commercialization, can they reach out to you guys, or we also can invite them, and then we can have all sorts of options available, and or what help we can offer.
Now, absolutely, I'm very open to it. You can reach out to me, whether that's on Twitter, whether that's on LinkedIn, through you guys. Very open to conversations, and kind of sharing more with you. And if it goes down a path where we can work together, I welcome it. If not, I'm learning along the way as well. But yes, please have the audience or anybody else feel free to reach out to me, and we can engage in any to sort of collaboration or just sharing.
Thank you, guys. And then from my perspective, the conversation what we had, and time just passed by, and everything that you have shared, explained, and made us to see what you are seeing is the core anchors or agility, resilience, and anti-fragility. We talked about COVID. We talked about 2023, the financial conditions, what is tangible versus intangible, and how we need to be looking out for the competitors, all that stuff. It goes back to the core anchors of agility, resilience, and anti-fragility webinars that we did last month. So definitely this conversation needs to be watched and learn a lot. So thanks, guys, for your valuable insights, and pleasure is ours to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks again. Be well.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.